mind. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you all to my next guest. She's the owner of Halal Girl About Town, the owner of Modest Mama, and one of my really close friends. So, hi, Layla.
Hello. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I know we have a really short time span where your baby is sleeping that we get to record this
We,
podcast.
we
It's only
have,
like half an
yeah,
hour.
so, but,
But I'm so excited to have you on here.
yeah, I know. And thank you for inviting me. I feel so special and lucky to be on this amazing podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you today because we're going to be talking around the Indian expectation on miscarriage and the taboo and stigma around still speaking about it. So, for everyone who is listening to this and watching this who doesn't know what a miscarriage is a loss of pregnancy up to 23 weeks. And miscarriages happen in 1 in 4 pregnancies. So, it's probably happened to someone that you know or even someone within your family. So, it's a really important topic for us to discuss today. So, Lila, can you tell us a little bit about your experience and what kind of happened when you found out about the loss of the baby?
Um, so I basically had an ectopic pregnancy, and that is basically when the fertilized egg happens to implant onto the tube, so your fallopian tube, as opposed to in that ends up growing, and in essence, the pregnancy is not viable as it's dangerous for the mum. So I actually didn't know I was pregnant. Carried on I was just doing my regular going to the gym, and I did take a pregnancy test, and it turned out to be negative. So I thought, cool, let me just carry on. I then got my period, and I was like, okay, my period's late, but it's here. Then my period stopped after 3 days, and the following weekend, my period started again, and it was heavy for 7 days. And I remember thinking, okay, this is my actual period. I mean, looking back, it's pretty silly of me to think that, but that's what was going through my mind at the time. And then the following week later, I got my period again for the third time. And I remember thinking, this is just weird, but I guess it's normal. And it was only until I spoke to my mum, who was like, you should go to the GP right now because you shouldn't be getting your period 3 times in a row. Go get checked out. So I went to the GP, who berated me for not doing a pregnancy test. Okay, like I did one at the beginning of the month, but anyways, and from there on, it felt like the next day I went to the hospital. No, sorry, so I did a pregnancy test, and it turned out it was positive. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. And I remember I told a bath, and I was really excited. So despite me bleeding, despite, some pain there, I was like, oh, wow, I'm actually pregnant. And oh, wow, this is, bleeding is kind of normal in pregnancy. So, this is fine. And it was only until the next day when I realized, okay, this is not normal. So I went to the hospital, and they gave me a scan. They realized, oh, your tube had burst, and there was no way they could save the pregnancy, and there's no way they could save the tube either. So I ended up having to have a surgery in order to remove the tube and remove the internal bleeding that had basically pulled up. Obviously, it was a traumatic experience. But what kind of stood out to me was I had this whole procedure, everything, and I think I was so I don't know, maybe it's overwhelmed. Like I remember the doctor coming up to me, making me sign forms. What do you want to do with the fetus? Do you want us to get rid of it? Do you want to take it home? And I was like, whoa, this is too much for me. Uh, so, anyways, after that, I went home to stay with my mum, and it was only then that it kind of dawned on me exactly what had happened. And, I was like, wow, I've lost a pregnancy. I've lost a child. My sister was pregnant at the same time as me. We would have been due at the same time. It was just all rushing back to me. And it was really weird because I had a lot of relatives come visit me after this happened. And so many cousins and so many friends started then coming out with their own stories of, oh, we had a miscarriage and this is how we cope. And, we had a miscarriage, we've had 3 miscarriages. And I was like, whoa, like I had no idea any of this had happened. Um, I was like taken aback at the fact that they had been quiet and they'd been
Yeah.
silent about it for the last God knows how many years. I'm not talking about young cousins, these are like older aunties as well. So I feel like people were coming out and talking about their stories and their experiences. And for me, it was really great for my mental health to know that I wasn't alone
Mm-hmm.
in the whole thing. However, it also made me feel isolated at the same time because everyone talks about it for that time and then they're quiet. They go back to saying nothing about the issue. They don't ask you how you are like 3 months down the line after it's happened. And that's it, back to normal life.
Yeah.
And it's only now that I started this website, I started Modest Mama, I've been like, okay, like I want people to share their stories, you know? I want people to not feel isolated like I did.
Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's so important, right? It's like when you go through something so traumatic and so hard, and I remember for you it was your first baby, right? So I think when you're looking forward to that experience, it's one of the most heartbreaking things for it to just be taken away from you. And often you feel that nobody else has gone through it or is going through it. But the fact that it's so common that it happens in 1 in 4 women, and that you said that when you were getting your cousins and relatives and friends around that were talking about it, why do you think it's still such a taboo in the Indian culture and generally in the Western world as well?
So yeah, like you said, I think it's not even just in the Indian culture. It's very a general taboo subject. And I've kind of thought about why this is the case. And like there are quite a few reasons. I mean, number one, like even when you get pregnant, you have to wait those 12 weeks in order to tell people or announce that you're pregnant. You've also got the whole aspect of grief and loss is a very awkward subject, would you say? It's
Yeah.
not, you don't want to talk about it to other people because you don't want them to feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I think back in the day with even like our parents or their parents' generation, when something like this would happen, they were just expected to come home and just get back onto the housework, get back onto looking after their children.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because, people like my own mother, she had a miscarriage at 6 months. And
Wow.
that's a big, like, that's very well into her pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And, she came home from the hospital and that was it. She got back to doing the housework, doing the cooking and stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the older generation were a very awkward generation in the sense of they don't want to talk about things like this.
Exactly.
They just want to just brush it under the rug, everything will be fine.
100%.
Also, I think as dated as it seems, when a miscarriage happens, the parents, people look to the parents as if there's something wrong with them,
Mm-hmm.
especially the, people are like, there's something wrong with her, or she did something wrong. So it's just generally like it's really dated thinking, and it really needs to change.
I completely agree, and I think there's so many things you mentioned there, right? First one was it's just as hard to lose a baby at 3 weeks than it is to at 6 months, and we shouldn't judge people for showing the same emotion at that time, or say, oh, it's not as important, or you didn't go through the same thing, because it's completely is the same feeling. The second thing you said was, in the Indian culture, you just brush everything under the carpet, and there's several women in my family who have gone through miscarriage and baby loss. And when I speak to them about it, they're just like, yeah, we just had to get back to work. We just didn't talk about it, because I think in this generation, we talk about our feelings, we talk about what upsets us, we talk about how we can actually learn from it and grow from it and what we need to do to heal ourselves. But in our parents' generation, it was always about like, what can I do for other people? Women, when they talk about their own feelings and things that they need, are seen to be as selfish. And so they just weren't given a voice to even share their grief or their pain through going through baby loss. And I think that's something that has changed, but it's still such a taboo because, like you said, the third point, people often blame the mother, right? And it's within our culture that people still blame the mother. And I'll give you an example. When you have like a baby shower in the Indian culture, you have this ceremony where a woman in the family has to pass over something to the mum that's going to be giving birth, right? And if you've had a miscarriage, you are unable to perform in that. Now, my dad was really annoyed about this because he was like, what's the meaning behind this, right? Like, why are we forbidding women who have gone through a miscarriage through no fault of their own to treat them as bad luck? Because if they've had a miscarriage and they pass something to you in this baby shower or whatever the religious ceremony is, you are then seen as like tainted, or you're then seen as like a bad luck. And so women are scared to share that they've been through a miscarriage because then they're then portrayed to be someone who is bad luck and going to cause that on somebody else, which is completely ridiculous. But it's within our culture that we still look at women that have had a miscarriage as someone who can't perform something in a religious
I
ceremony.
think that's like a really isolating experience for the woman as well, because it's kind of basically saying you are seen as something, you're seen as something with bad luck,
Yes.
and you're not basically wanted at the baby shower. And it kind of pushes your grief
Yeah.
away as if it's nothing, and it makes you feel like, wow, like I'm all alone in this, and no one else, is experiencing any of this.
And it's almost like you said, people often blame the mother, right? So it's small comments, and we'll come on to things like that because I remember you sharing things like that with me. But it's more that you've been through this awful experience, something that's traumatizing for a mother to lose a child that's been within her, and then you're then seen to be bad luck forever, and you can't carry it out in this religious ceremony. And I think that's something that we really need to change when we're having these religious ceremonies. You have to understand why we have these traditions and break them down. So if a woman has been through a miscarriage, it does not mean that she is bad luck because she touches something that's going to be passed on to the new mother. You would allow your baby in there, a woman who had a miscarriage. So why in these ceremonies are we isolating women and actually asking them, have you been through baby loss? Have you lost a baby? If you have, step away. If something bad has happened in your family, step away. It's like a very negative way of addressing the issue. And also, like you said, closing down people from talking about it. From your experience, from people who are sharing their stories on your website and with you, are there any actual causes of miscarriage that people have identified?
I mean, to be honest, I don't think that's like a. I find when people are asking, "Oh, why? What happened?
Mm,
What happened?" Like, it's just not important. Basically, in the early miscarriages, they're never going to investigate what the problem is, what the cause is. It could be anything. For most of the time, it's just nothing related to the mum
yeah.
or the child. It just happens. And I feel like, like even in early miscarriages, the only time they'll really investigate is if it's happened 3, 4 times,
Okay.
because then there's something wrong. Like you
Mm,
said earlier, 1 in 4 pregnancies end in a miscarriage, and it's just there's there's literally no reason. Like there's no reason for anyone else to also question why. It makes the mother feel bad as well. It makes both the parents feel bad. Like, oh, were we to blame? They're already blaming themselves.
mm.
So there's no reason to add to that.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that is I know that was a common question people would ask you, right? Or try and probe you to tell them things that you'd been doing so that it didn't happen to them. What are some of the things not to say to somebody who's experienced baby loss?
Okay, so I can like write a whole book on this subject because I think I've heard every call. When I had my own experience, I was like, wow, okay, some of the things people are coming out with. So I just want to start off by saying, unless you've had a miscarriage yourself, you won't really know what to say. And it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Like you think you're saying things for the best of that person or the best for that person, but in reality, that person takes it in a way that is upsetting to them. So I can give I can give a handful of things not to say. So first and foremost is what we were just talking about with regards to the cause of a miscarriage. And it would be, don't say things like, oh, it must have been all the exercising or all the, you know, exercising, working, stressing that you were doing. Because, like I said, there is no cause for this miscarriage to happen. We're just adding guilt to the parents who already feel bad already. You know, that was one of the things I heard. Another one was, oh, you can start trying again because you're the most fertile right now. Mind you, this is like, between 6 weeks after the loss happened. And I had like older people coming up to me to say, but you can start trying again. It's like, well, that person perhaps has been through such a traumatic experience. They don't want to try again. Another thing would be at least you can get pregnant, or at least you have a child already. So just a heads up, any starting with at least is always a bad idea, and never ever say that to someone who's gone through a loss. Any sentence like begins with at least is just not helpful. It's going to lead to nowhere. You know, yes, I have a child already, but I'm grieving this child that could have been, and at least you can get pregnant with regards to that. It's like, yeah, maybe I got pregnant this time, but who knows? Maybe I won't be able to get pregnant again, or something will happen, or maybe I just don't want to be pregnant because I'm so scarred from the first time. So it's just all these small things. And what I can say is that there are some things you can say to both the parent, because remember, it's not just the mum, it's the dad as well. Simple things like, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I hope you're okay. Small things like dropping food off to them, or sending flowers, or even sending a card just to say how sorry you are. Like after you have a pregnancy loss, depending on how far along it was or how much damage it's done to your body, you can go through. You can either go through surgery, you have to take a pill. It's just a lot to take. So small gestures like food on the doorstep right now because of COVID. And also, finally, I would say just keep checking in on them. Just because they had a miscarriage, my miscarriage happened, 2, 3 years ago. But it would be really nice if someone checked in now to be like, hey, how are you doing? And that just goes for any woman who has experienced a miscarriage. 6 weeks later, everyone's forgotten about them. Everyone thinks, yeah, they're fine, they'll just brush it under the rug. It's cool. But no, really, that's the time when they want people to check in on them, to see if they're okay. They want to talk to someone about it. Don't get me wrong, this is not applicable to all women. Some women, deal with the grief differently. They carry on like everything's fine. Some women just take it really badly, and there's actually studies that have shown that it's almost equivalent to post-traumatic stress disorder for some women.
Wow.
So it's just really important to just keep checking in on them.
And also communicate with your friends or family or anyone who's been through it as how they would like to communicate, right? So like you said, people have different ways and styles of communication. Some people want to talk about it and some people don't. And the other thing that you said, which I think is really important, that I don't think people are aware of, and something that I've actually missed, is checking in on the dad and asking the father how they're feeling as well, because I think people just forget that it's two people in this situation, not just one.
So like I remember in my own experience, Abbas was running like between the two hospitals. It was a long story, but anyways, he was doing all the running around, all the admin work behind getting me sorted out. Um, and I don't remember anyone checking in on him just to see if he's okay. And for him, it's a loss, like of a child, just as much as it is for me. Yes, fine, I'm carrying the child, but for the dad, it's just as important. And I feel like they're forgotten about. And so I think it's just really important to check in on them too.
Would you, talking about it a few years later, do you still think about that baby, and would you talk about it to your other kids about, I had a baby before you? Would you share that?
Yeah, I actually think I would, because I feel it's important for him to understand that this is normal. This happens so commonly. And I would share it with him in the hopes that when he's older, he will be understanding as well. Like he will understand if, God forbid, it happened to his own wife, or if it happened to someone he knows, or his sister, or whoever. I would definitely, yeah, I don't think there's any shame in sharing with him at all.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful and really important as well. What's something you'd like to share as a piece of advice for someone who's just experienced baby loss at the moment?
I think if you are experiencing a pregnancy loss, I'm very, very sorry to hear that, and it is a really traumatic experience, or it can be a really traumatic experience. I think that if you are going through a pregnancy loss, or you have been through one recently, or even in the last few years, I do recommend getting in touch with, there's a lot of support groups out there, like women's support groups for miscarriages, especially. I actually found it useful to speak through. I actually found it useful to speak to a therapist about this. Or I think it just helped me to process the whole thing. I also suggest Like, if any friends or family are, if any friends or family are offering to help, just do take that help, because it's really important that you take, it's really important for you to deal with the grief or deal with the loss that you've just experienced.
That's really insightful, and I think that's great advice for people who are going through that at the moment. And I know you have your My Modest Mama page, which shares a lot of these stories, which can be quite helpful for someone going through that experience, especially if they're feeling isolated and they don't have anyone to talk to. So if you are going through that and you do need a bit of support, do go to Layla's page. It's mymodestmama.com, and I really think you'll find some things on there that will help you. But before we close, what's the one thing you'd like to change around the Indian expectation on baby loss and miscarriage?
I think it's just time to normalize it, you know. I think it's time to look at it as there's nothing wrong with having a baby loss. There's nothing wrong with someone else experiencing a baby loss. I think it's more, we need to start talking about it, amongst friends, amongst family. It needs to be just generally spoken about. As I mentioned earlier, the 12-week rule of not saying anything to anyone can be quite damaging. So the best thing to do is to us as a community just start talking, start normalizing the whole thing. There's nothing wrong with having a miscarriage. It's not the greatest thing, but it's so common that there's nothing wrong with it.
Definitely, and having a community of people who are speaking about it and sharing their experience can sometimes be really supportive and help you go through something like that. And also just to find a way to check in with your friends and family. I think that's such a great point that you said, and I'm going to be really conscious about that going forward. So thank you for coming on and talking about this topic. I know it's really hard and can often bring up a few feelings and emotions that relate back to that time. So thank you for coming on here and talking to me.
No worries. Thank you for having me. I just wanted to end by saying, yes, like Shivani said, I do have a website, mymodestmama.com. It has plenty of information out there with regards to miscarriages, but even more positive topics like, pregnancy, nutrition, stuff like that. So don't be afraid to get in touch with me via the website. It's an open platform for everyone.
Yeah, and I love your website. I think it's really informative and helpful. So everyone check it out, and Lai, I will see you soon.